Well, it's that time again. Welcome in to the All Utah Hockey Podcast. Make sure you give us a like. Check out all of Craig's written content at allcitynetwork.com. Follow the show at Twitter at all_Utah Hockey and subscribe to our YouTube channel at All Utah Hockey. I'm Petey. Along with me, as always, is Craig Morgan. And becoming a show regular here, we might have to start paying you, making you full time here. Belle Fraser coming in from the Salt Lake Tribune. Thanks, Belle, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Well, Belle, the final rosters for this Utah Hockey Club will be all set by early next week. The opening night is Tuesday night. So it's time to talk about the projected roster for this Utah Hockey Club. And what we've done before, because Craig and I have done this for a different hockey club, a whole completely different franchise. Kind of. So what we're going to do, Bells, we're going to go position group by position group, and we're going to talk about what we think line matchups, players. You've been boots on the ground, and you've seen this team up close and personal, so we're really looking forward to getting your perspective. Craig's and I's, not as much. Like, really. Craig, what do you think?
Yeah, two old guys who, we just yell at clouds, so keep us out of this.
I couldn't agree more. Oh. I'm sorry, Bill. I stepped all over you. See, this is Bill. I'll be honest. This is the first time you and I have worked together, so I am going to be patient because, as you can see, I like to talk. So if I talk over you, I apologize now. So let's get started because they've got a game tonight, another big game for the Utah in preseason, and I still think there's some roster decisions to be made, and I think that's something that people need to be on the lookout for, because some people think that the roster is set in stone, and I honestly, with one preseason game left to go, I don't think that it is. So, Belle, what are your thoughts going into tonight's game?
Yeah, well, we were talking to Coach today, and he said that he'll take it out till Saturday and play a group of players he's unsure who are on the brink of, and he's not taking today to be the final decision, and I think that shows just what a tough spot Utah's in right now, but it's the spot you want to be in as a team going to the season. You want to have players forcing you to make hard decisions. And we were talking about it before, but Josh Doan and Keller Yamamoto are two guys really doing that for Coach and the management. And, we talked about Josh Doan last podcast. He's making a push after a productive end of last season, and he's looked great in camp. But then Yamamoto, who's on the PTO, and he comes out last night with 2 goals after playing pretty well in all the preseason games he's been in. And the thing that Coach has preached about him is that he's been able to play in every role that Utah's put him in. He played on the first line last night, showed he could keep up with a guy like Keller, like Hayton, but he's also played bottom 6 roles and fit in there too. So the team has said he's kind of doing everything that he possibly can be to prove his role, but it really is that fourth line, that bottom 6, where there's a couple people that could really slot in. And you look at Liam O'Brien, who's a fan favorite early on. And I think a lot of Utah fans would be upset not to see him being a regular, but, he could be an extra forward. And then you have Carconi too, who has torn it up this preseason, more than 20 goals last year. So it's almost like Sophie's choice. It feels like you can't go wrong. But
wow. Was that for us? Was that a reference for us?
Yeah. How many people under the age of 30 right now are going, what? Whose choice?
I learned that from my dad.
Oh, that didn't help, Belle. It didn't help. But you are right. And Craig, if we could let's put up our forwards graphic and let's if we could take a peek at what we have. And now these lines clearly are not, what they're playing with in preseason. Guys have had different spots and things. They're just, as a group, we kind of looked and said, okay, this is something that could be. Craig, what are your thoughts on this forward lineup as we get started? And we'll start where Bell left off. Let's start at the bottom. Let's start where we're talking about that fourth line.
Yeah, I'm really curious what they do here. Like all the things that Bell's saying, Andre's been saying, right? Kyler Yamamoto is really interesting to me. What he needs to do is play with pace. There are guys that I've talked to in his past who talked about his two-way game, accepting maybe that he's going to be a bottom six forward in this league instead of that guy who plays with Connor McDavid. And if he can do that, if he can embrace that, there's a lot he can bring because he's clearly a skilled player. He's lit it up so far. Andre Tourigny is raving about him. There are no contract talks yet, but I can't help wondering if they're going to be soon if he keeps this up. And that creates a real mess at the bottom of this lineup. Petey, you mentioned the guys who are waiver exempt. I mean, Josh Doan can go down without any issues. There aren't a lot of options there. And I really have a hard time believing that they're going to start that first game against the Blackhawks without Liam O'Brien in the lineup. I think there might be a riot in the stands if Liam O'Brien is not in the lineup.
Yeah, and Bell mentioned it too. I know he's a fan favorite, and Bell, when he was with his former franchise, the Arizona Coyotes, I understand Liam's role. I like Liam O'Brien. I like what he brings. However, and I'll admit, I said this to his face, so I'm not talking out of school. I think he takes too many penalties. And I think he takes too many penalties at the wrong time, and he has a hard time walking that fine line. And I know Utah fans are going to like that he sticks up for teammates, but this isn't a team that's offensively gifted enough to give opposing teams free power plays and that with the man advantage. So I think Liam O'Brien's a guy, for me, and I'm not on the coaching staff, but he's a situational guy. He's not an every night, 82-night game player. And you're looking at what Michael Carcone, a name we haven't really talked a lot about offensively. I want Carcone in the lineup. I think he can get on F1 on the forecheck much quicker. He gets to the net better. He's got more offensive upside. He can play power play too if you really need him to. I think Carcone can do more than Liam O'Brien. So that leaves you, Stenlund's going to play. He's going to play. Won a Stanley Cup. He's in the middle. He's playing. So now you've got those two, and then you've got Doan and Yamamoto. I think there's an issue. And I said a week ago, Doan's making the team. He has to. It's Josh Doan. But right now, he might be the odd guy out. And you look at contracts and the ability to send people down. Like Carcone's not going to clear. I don't think he would. He might, because so many teams are making room for their players right now. Liam O'Brien, they're not going to waive. They're not. He's there. So now you're looking at Doan, Carcone, and Yamamoto. They're not going to sign and send down to Tucson right away either. So as a sure thing for Josh Doan, I'm not so sure that he is going to be here on Monday night again. So I think tonight's going to be a huge test for these guys. They got to play well in these preseason games.
I think the point about Carcone to not clearing waivers, I completely agree with that. I mean, he's a guy that I agree should be in the lineup. And we were kind of talking to him and coach just about his journey. You know, he's 28 and he's acting like he's fighting for a roster spot like a 22-year-old Josh Doan, you know, and he spent 5 years in the AHL and kept coming back every year, getting better and working his way up into a regular NHL slotting. And that's just the kind of character and perseverance that you want on a team. And he knows he's not there for free, and he's going to work his, full heart out every night to be a difference maker for them. And coach was talking about how that's been a really good kind of example for the younger guys in the room. This week, there were a lot of cuts and they're going back to Tucson or to their junior teams. And you have a guy like Carcone who didn't take the usual route that a lot of NHL players think they're going to take to make it to the show. But here he is, on the doorstep of an opening night roster spot and being an important player for them. So I would go him too. And I think the penalties is really interesting. Not that it's been all O'Brien taking penalties in the preseason. And of course it's just preseason, but they've taken far too many penalties. I wrote a story about this, and they're lucky their PK has looked great. It went 4 for 4 last night. Granted, it was San Jose and again, preseason. And their power play has found some consistency, but you can't go into a regular season game taking 8+ penalties a game and expecting to win. And like you said, no matter how good their goal scoring is, it can't make up for that indisciplined play. So I think that's definitely something they'll have to think about and something that hurt them last year. And if they want to turn a corner this year, I think that's got to kind of be put behind them.
I want to talk about the power line, but Belle, I'm curious what Andre is saying about Michael Carcone's play away from the puck, because that was an issue last season. That was a constant reminder. They were harping on him to be more detailed. How has he shown thus far in the preseason? What does the coaching staff think of that?
Yeah, he said, he was like, he scores goals. We know, coach said this, like, we know Carconi will score goals. That's never a doubt for us. But like you said, we really want him to be a little bit more well-rounded. And when I talked to Carconi at the beginning of the camp, that's what he said. He said he wanted to get bigger and stronger this summer. He believed he did that. And he wanted to prove that he could play in all three zones. And it's kind of a similar message that Josh Doan gave too. I think all of these players who are fighting for bottom six roles want to prove to the coaching staff that they can be out there in the last minute of the game, on the power play, on the penalty kill. You know, versatility is key to being a successful player in the NHL. And that's very clear to Carconi. And I think you've seen that in, you know, his defensive details in the games he's played. And he's someone who goes extremely hard at practice. You know, you can't gauge a ton from how guys are playing and in the short drills and stuff like that. But he's a guy who's been going 100%, you know, for the past 10 days or so. So I think that message is clear from the coaching staff down. It's something he embraced. And, you know, I don't think he would be in contention for this role if he didn't do that this training camp.
Craig, I want to switch gears and say, stop at the bottom of the lineup and flip it over and start looking at the top of the lineup. Because it's funny, inside a coach's room, how much time is spent on the guys on the fourth line. It is every year we'd sit here at training camp in the coaching room and you'd go, oh my gosh, who's in, who's out? And you're like, the guy's going to play 7 minutes. What are we doing? And you spend so much time talking about the bottom of the lineup. And here we're doing it on the roster show. We're talking about the bottom lineup again. So let's get to the top. And a couple things I wanted to ask you, Craig. We're looking at Clayton, Keller, Barrett Hayton, Schmaltz. They're the de facto top line right now. It looks like they're going to be together again. Schmaltz took the night off last night with Yamamoto in that spot. Craig, get your thoughts on what you're thinking about this top line.
Well, I think it's the top line, like you said, by default right now. I don't think having Barrett Hayton necessarily as your number one center is ideal. I don't think that's where he fits best, although he's had some success between these guys in the past. He's a space eater, a space creator for these guys who like to play the high cycle in the zone that we've seen so many times. He allows them to do that. He gives them the space by going to the net front, going to the dirty areas. Eventually, they'd like to have someone else between them, right? But I got to believe that this is the line right now because you just don't have any other options. I don't think Logan Cooley fits on this line. I think he's a better fit where we have him. We'll talk about that in a minute. I don't want to go too far down this road, but I also wonder about Nick Schmaltz's future. Like, what happens if we get all the way to the trade deadline? Utah's not in a playoff position. And I believe Nick Schmaltz would be going into the final year of his contract the next year. What do you do with Nick Schmaltz at that point? Do you try and move him? We've talked about this a lot, but a lot to parse with this first line.
Yeah, I tell you, Belle, you and I haven't had a chance to talk about this yet, so you're going to hear it for the first time. Clayton Keller found himself a few years ago where he went from just a cute little offensive player to a guy that can play 200 feet, can play with a little bit of grit, can play with a little bit of energy. And we're still waiting to see that from Nick Schmaltz. And I say it every year. Nick Schmaltz can be the best player on the ice for this hockey team. He can. He's got the skill. He's got the speed. He's got the ability to protect the puck, get to the net, shoot. All of those skills he possesses. His ability to do that consistently, not game to game, but shift to shift, has been glaring in his entire time with this previous franchise in Arizona. I'm concerned about that. You never see his meter, his energy meter go high enough consistently. And I think they're going to have to move past him at some point because I don't think with a center like Barrett Hayton, now you put a true, no offense to Barrett Hayton, a true number one center in that spot that can pull Schmaltz along with, maybe. But Barrett Hayton, to me, on a team that wins a Stanley Cup, Barrett Hayton's your third line center. Yeah, he's not your top center. So unless Schmaltz finds a way to find that consistency, and maybe the change did it. Maybe moving to Utah, a new fan base, new arena, maybe that will finally wake him up and get him playing the way he wants to play. But Belle, what are your thoughts on that top line?
I was going to say, not to add to the concern about Schmaltz, but he has not been fully practicing for the past few days. Coach said it was day to day and that he should be good to go tomorrow, but he also said that he should be good to go tomorrow 2 days ago. And he skated with Nick Bjugstad and Alex Kerfoot, who is also day-to-day after the main group practice today. And he skated a bit with the forwards this morning, but he's had a lot less preseason action than I think they would like of that. Like you saw Yamamoto was on that first line last night instead of Schmaltz. So I think coming into the season, when you're looking for him to have consistency, and I'm not saying this is a big injury, it sounds just like a training camp tweak, but you kind of want him to be 100% and not, skating with the injured players 6 days before opening night. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. But yeah, I think the comment about Hayton is really interesting too, that if this is a Stanley Cup team, he's a third line center, which I agree with. But I also think that the way he's heavier, he's not afraid to be physical. We talked about his net front presence, and Keller talked a lot about how he just gets out there and makes space for himself and Schmaltz. And I think that, yes, if you had an all-star center carrying Schmaltz up with them, like that would be great. That's what you want to get your wingers to produce. But at the same time, I think that it's on the better side that Hayton isn't undersized, that he's not just focused on producing for himself and that type of thing. So I like the first line. I think that's where Hayton should be in this lineup. I wouldn't put him anywhere else, but it's just kind of, you work with the lineup you have. But I do think Schmaltz will be interesting to see, because no one's doubting what Keller is going to produce this season. He's going to be an all-star. He's going to score. He already did in the first preseason game. He was the overtime hero, and that's just a taste of what Utah fans can expect. But I think this is an opportunity for Schmaltz to turn the page and kind of show this organization that I can be that go-to guy, like you said, on a shift-to-shift basis and nightly basis. So in terms of the configuration of the lineup, I keep that line, but I do have the same questions that you have about just consistency and his health too.
And I want to say this too. You're right. Like, Barrett Hayton is the number one center on this team. That's the spot he has to play, and he's played extremely well with these two players at various times. The problem with both Schmaltz and Hayton is their inability to make it through a complete season without being injured, which is something that this franchise hadn't seen for years. When Hayton was healthy, with Schmaltz and Keller, that line was very effective. He can win draws because of his size. He can defend extremely well. It gets to the net, some places that Schmaltz maybe doesn't want to go, and he can help clean up the messes around the blue paint. So yeah, I do think that's the spot. I just worry about what Craig said. The center depth on this team has been and continues to be, especially with Bjugstad out of the lineup, continues to be an issue. Let's look what we have up on that second line. And so moving on, Logan Cooley, sophomore season, breaking out. Dylan Guenther, the gunner on the right, who had some expected to make the team out of camp last year, did not. And oddly enough, Jack McBain on the left. Craig Morgan, thoughts on what I put up there for the second line on this club?
Well, I think we should start with like a Costco update from Belle on Dylan Guenther, Jack McBain, because these guys are a riot together. Like,
they're a mess. They're a mess.
They are a mess. It feels like they need like a mom living with them to take care of them, because they can't pay their bills. They go shopping and they come home with a hot tub. Come on, guys. You need to learn to live on your own. I just did a story on both of these guys, and I was talking to McBain about it. He's like, yeah, it's a good idea. Neither one of us, has a girlfriend or a pet or anything, because we got all we can do to just take care of ourselves right now. What do you think about this line? We've talked about Nick Bjugstad's absence, right? That's impacting these middle two lines in a way. I don't know what happens when Nick comes back, if he slides back between Lawson Crouse and Matis Maccelli, or if they juggle things. But do you think, Belle, that Jack McBain's home is going to be on the wing now instead of in the middle where they thought he was going to play initially?
I mean, he looks extremely comfortable on the wing. I think if for fans that are watching this team for the first time and came and saw a game with that line, you would almost believe that that's where he was playing kind of his whole career. And I think Jack McBain too, I was talking to him today, actually, bring up the Costco thing. I can mention that after, which was funny about their off ice shenanigans. But I was just talking about, how camp is getting more intense and just the feeling in the locker room, knowing some of these guys that maybe deserve a spot are going to get cut, and how that changes the dynamic. And he was saying, like, I'm not so far out of that bubble, like that was me 2 years ago, and you still feel it. And I think for him, he's still in the mindset of, I'll play whatever role I need to be an important player on this team. And he's done that. And kind of similar to the role Hayton plays, Cooley was saying that McBain also opens up the ice for them. And not that Guenther's undersized, he's pretty tall, but Cooley's, that's a small center, and you kind of need someone like McBain out there with them. So I've liked that. And I think you kind of have to roll with the chemistry that Guenther and Cooley started. It would be a shame not to see where that goes. But at the same time, when Guenther went up to play with Keller, they each had 3 or 2 point nights, 3 points nights, I believe. So it's like, I think not to go back to the conversation about Schmaltz, but evidently Keller has another winger he can play with that would work as well. But I think you leave the second line. I think you have to see Cooley and Guenther through. And until Bjugstad comes back, McBain has played well there. And I know he's a natural center, but he kind of looks natural on the wing as well and has produced for them. So another check from me for the line.
It's funny though, because McBain, we talked about it being a center a couple of years ago. Last year he struggled at times to be the player and take that next step that I think the fan base and the organization wanted to see from him. So this line, it's going to force him. It's going to force him to pick up the offensive side of his game, pick up his pace, because you're playing with Cooley and Guenther. You better get going, because that puck's coming to the net when they're getting up the ice quickly. But I do think the one thing on a Bill Armstrong team is the size and the ability to protect your teammates. I don't necessarily love this line. I want to see a trio with these guys. I'd like to see a veteran guy on the wing with Guenther and Cooley, somebody that can really help teach these guys the game. Having said that, we've seen what Logan Cooley can do with a little chip on his shoulder. He's going to get people upset. Like, his opponents are not going to like Logan Cooley. He just plays that way. He's all in. He's going to use his stick, his body, and he's going to upset people. You want Jack McBain on the ice when Logan Cooley's making people upset, because he's willing to protect his teammates. So I think this is a line. I don't think this will be long-term. It might be if they find that chemistry early. I just think it's a kind of, hey, let's wait and see until Bjugstad gets back. Let's see where this line progresses. It might be lightning in a bottle. It might be unbelievable.
PD, let me ask you that, like, pushing that a step further. What would you do? What would be the replacement on this line? Would you put a guy like Alex Kerfoot, who can obviously...
Yeah, I like Kerfoot.
Okay.
You know what I think of Kerfoot. I think Kerfoot's pace is unbelievable. I think his offensive upside is great. He can take draws if he needs to on that line. And so you've got the dual centers, as it were. He's a better playmaker than McBain's going to be. I think he's going to be able to distribute the puck. Even though he's smaller, he's very effective at digging the puck out in the corners. And I think he can get the puck to those guys. And he just, hey, let's face it, his hockey IQ is a little bit higher than Jack McBain's is right now. And I think that's going to be helpful, especially in the defensive zone, where this line may have some issues. And I've talked about this team and their ability to defend from the blue line in as it is. And you put Cooley, Guenther, and McBain, I have concerns from the defensive side of the puck that there may be a shade of running around. And I think Kerfoot could really calm that down. So yeah, I think Kerfoot can play on any line on this team. I love Alex Kerfoot. I think he can fit anywhere. So ultimately, when everybody's back and healthy, I do think he's a guy that could slide into that spot. Belle?
Yeah, I agree. I will also say, like you were saying, things will probably change when Bjugstad comes back. Perhaps we'll see Kerfoot move up. But if we're going to call it a Band-Aid, if things are going to change, this is a pretty good Band-Aid for a Utah team.
For sure.
And I think it's exciting that the team and the organization is in a spot where their prospects are panning out. And you're seeing a guy like Jack McBain be able to fill a hole like this. And if it went like this for the entire regular season, they could figure it out. And I think there could be better versions of the line once you get some important pieces back. But I think, yeah, it just shows the forward depth that they have, that this is a line that you're kind of, we could make it better. And that's exciting, I think, for this team, and shows that they're kind of talk about the upward trajectory. And unfortunately, they get moved out of Arizona right when it feels like all the hard rebuilding work is kind of coming to fruition. But I think this is an example of that. But yeah, I do agree someone with the veteran experience like Alex Kerfoot could slot in there. And I think that's been a really big theme throughout training camp and this team this season, is balancing that young talent with the more veteran guys. And that's what you need. And you need them to go out there and learn from someone like Kerfoot, who's played in 100 more scenarios than Jack McBain has. But that being said, I'm pretty comfortable with that line going out opening night if that's what it is. And just a tidbit, I think too, like Guenther and McBain and Cooley too, but I've talked more to McBain and Guenther, like they're having fun. They're 21 and 24 years old, getting the opportunity to be top 6 players in an inaugural season. And it's nice how, I guess, humble would be the word it is. Like Guenther was sitting in his contract extension press conference, and he said with all the money, he's going to go on a Costco trip with McBain. And, I think that just shows just like the state of life these guys are in, where they're still just kids who love playing hockey and want to do the best they can. And yeah, McBain was laughing today. He said their first purchase after the contract was a hot tub, which, it's just shows the personality and kind of just where they are in life in general away from hockey. So I think they're two guys, and Cooley obviously with the star power, but they're embracing this and they don't want this opportunity to go for granted, and then they want the coaching staff to trust them. So I think all of that mixed together, it'll be a fine second line for time being.
One point, Petey, before we move on to the other line in the call-ups, don't shortchange Dylan Guenther's defensive game either. Like, if you talk to Andre, he'll tell you everybody looks at the shot, right? They think of the offensive ability. This is a pure goal scorer. But Andre will tell you this guy is on the ice because he's a complete player. He does everything right. He plays the game the right way. So that has an impact on that line as well. Go ahead, Petey.
I agree. Let's get to that third line, at least the way we put up in order. And I think that's one thing about this Utah Hockey Club. I don't know. I think the top line sets themselves apart from the other lines. But when you look at 2, 3, and 4, I don't know if they are a 2, 3, and 4. They're very interchangeable because they all play a little bit different role. But I don't know if I'd go this line is necessarily. So I had to put them in some sort of order. This is the order I put them in, but you're right, Bill. I think one of the luxuries this team has is their depth up front allows them to roll 4 lines and to have people they can trust on all 4 lines. So let's go. Yeah, last time on that forward graphic, let's pull up that third line. And right now, this is a spot that we were so used to seeing Bjugstad in the middle between Crouse and Maccelli. With Kerfoot out again, I think that's going to be an area that there's, again, concern. Do we see Maccelli and Crouse being that tandem that can't be separated, Bell? Have they shown themselves in practices that, they need to keep Crouse and Maccelli together?
Yeah, I mean, they picked up right where they left off, and I think they'll tell you that too. And Maccelli, I had an interesting conversation with him. He said he's been getting a lot of crap about not shooting enough, and that in a lot of his conversations with the coaching staff, they recognize his playmaking ability, and they know he's going to do that. That's proven. And very well with Crouse as well. Those two obviously connect extremely well and have in the preseason exhibition games that they've played together. But they want Maccelli scoring more goals. And he has the shot. And I asked him, I said, no one's doubting that you can do it. Is it more of a mental switch for you? And he kind of paused for a second. He was like, yeah, I think it is. He's like, I know I can score. But he says when he's on the rush and kind of playing with a guy like Crouse, who you almost want to default to most of the time, he kind of just has to flip a switch in his brain to be like, no, you take the shot. And I think you saw it last night. He was on a 2-on-1 breakaway. I forget who's on the other side, but he passed it and he didn't shoot it. And you kind of just saw him a little bit frustrated going back to the bench. So I think that's something he's actively thinking about. And you don't want him to ditch his passing and his view of the ice and hockey IQ for setting up his line mates and just shoot. But I think that he hasn't reached his ceiling and his highest potential, and that's great for that second line. And I think pairing him with someone like Crouse, who is not truly a real veteran, but who knows Maccelli, who has been in the league longer than him, who is, I feel, confident and knows what his game is to its core. I think that could really help Maccelli. And yeah, like you said, Kerfoot, we don't know what's going to happen there. Coach did say he should be good for opening night, so we probably can expect him to be between the two of them. But the same as I said for Cooley and Guenther, I think you kind of start with Maccelli and Crouse together and see how it proceeds.
Lawson Crouse is an old soul, at the very least. I think he's an old soul. So he belongs. Listen, Lawson Crouse wants to play with Matis Maccelli because he finds him with that absurd vision and playmaking ability. But yeah, Andre was saying it last year. Remember his quote last year when he said, I'm not telling him to shoot anymore. I'm telling him to pass to the mesh. So it's just, think of it as passing to the net. He's had this problem. He doubled his shooting last season. He did take a lot more shots last season, but I do agree with Bell. There's another step here for Matis Maccelli to become a complete player. And I think there are other parts of his game, by the way, that probably need to take another step up as well away from the puck. Go ahead, Petey.
Yeah, Matis Maccelli, a couple things. And we got some other business we have to take care of here. But with Matis Maccelli, Utah fans need to look for one of the most elite passers in the National Hockey League. And I don't want to sound like I'm overstating that. And when I say that to other hockey people, they go, who? Who are you talking about? Because they don't know who he is, because he played in Arizona and now Utah. No look, behind the back, between the legs passes, elite playmaker. And you're right, shooting has not been his strong point because he wants to make that pass. And I think that's inherently part of his DNA. But Bell and Utah fans, this as something we're trying to pass along, some of the old traditions from the old franchise. We try not to talk those. We won't talk about here, just like we don't talk about this team there. We want to try to pass something on, because with that Italian sounding name, Matis Maccelli says he's finished. We don't believe him for a second that he is finished. So when we ever talk about Matis Maccelli, we do the emoji, and I forgot what it's called, but it's a thing. It's an emoji thing.
All over Twitter. I caught on.
Yeah, so we got it. It's a Matis Maccelli. So we got to get that in the Utah fan base when he does something great. It's in the fans, in the stands, to make that emoji, and you need to look on your YouTube channel because I don't know what it's called. Matis Maccelli, the Finnish fettuccine. And with that,
I have it for you, Belle. It's called if you type in pinch, you'll find it. By the way, that's when it comes up.
Oh, is that what it is?
For you, yeah, because I asked him about his Italian ancestry because I said there's no way, that's obviously not a Finnish name, and he like brushed it off. He's like, hey, yeah, I think it was some on my grandma's side. I honestly have no idea. I think he's hiding something. I think there may be like mob ties in Matthias.
Next investigative piece out of Utah is he really not Italian?
We're going to finish up on the forwards in just a second. We're going to talk about the first call-ups coming up from Tucson when that team gets going. But before we do that, take care of a little business. I want to talk about our friends at FOCO. FOCO is the leading manufacturer of sports and entertainment merchandise with a product line that includes apparel, accessories, toys, collectibles, novelty items, and so much more. They have the best officially licensed gear for all sports and all fandoms, whether it's hoodies, jackets, beachwear, any clothing items, or Craig's favorite, and you might see him at the Utah Utes football game with his overalls and without a shirt underneath. If you look real close, Craig will be at the game with, yeah, no, he won't. There is something for fans of almost every occasion. Get all of your Utah Jazz and Utah Utes collectibles and merchandise. No hockey club stuff yet, but it's coming. FOCO always has your back for sports, and they have yours too. Get the best gear around by visiting foco.com and using the code ALLCITY10 for all non-presale items. Use the promo code ALLCITY10 for 10% off, and then make sure you get over to Rugged Road for your outdoor cooler. And in Utah, you need your outdoor cooler because we're camping, fishing, hiking, and Craig and I are just sitting out in our driveway because we're not doing any of those things because there's bugs and dark and it's cold.
The cooler.
Yeah. We still use the cooler. We just don't need to go hiking and camping to use it, because what Rugged Road does, they're dedicated to creating durable outdoor gear for adventurers who demand the best, whether you're on land or water. Rugged Road gear is built to accompany you on every adventure. Rugged Road coolers are designed to always float upright so that you never spill a drink. Rugged Road coolers are incredibly light, making them easy to transport on any trip. They're guaranteed to keep their contents cool for up to 7 days. Great for everything from fishing and tubing to camping and tailgating. These coolers are designed to meet the needs of every outdoor and sports enthusiast. So gear up for your next adventure with Rugged Road coolers. Reliable, durable, and built to be used. Rugged Road is your ultimate outdoor companion. Head to ruggedroadoutdoors.com and use the code ALLCITY for 10% off. That's ALLCITY for 10% off. Okay, Craig, back at it. We got to talk about call-ups, because part of forwards is having the ability to call guys up. We've talked about that fourth line. We've talked about there's 5 guys fighting for 3 everyday spots, but there are some other names we want to look at. Craig, are there some guys that jump out for you on who's next up on the forward position?
Well, I mean, the thing that really jumps out at me, especially if Josh Doan is not down there, is that it's a group that's not going to give you a lot of offense necessarily. These are more like a lot of these guys like Milos Kellerman. I know Patrick Brown will be happy that we're saying Milos. Most of these guys are guys that are just going to fill in. They're going to be depth guys. Ben McCartney's an energy guy. I still wonder about his future. I mean, if for some reason Yamamoto's down there, I don't see that happening. He could give you offense, but there's not a lot of offensive options. I'm missing Connor Geekie once again. I've said it. But that's a group where I think you're going to need to see an influx eventually, if they don't just come straight to the NHL, of maybe a little more offensive talent down in Tucson. Maybe some of those younger guys will come along, like a Julian Lutz or Sam Lipkin. We'll see what some of these guys are able to do when they're in Tucson.
The Bell?
Yeah, you mentioned Sam Lipkin. I'm biasedly high on Sam Lipkin just because I covered him in the NCAA, watched him win the national championship, and I think he just has that winning pedigree. And you talk about offense. I agree. I think you look at that group, and I would say McCartney has kind of stood out for me just in terms of consistency in the games he's played. And he had that 2 assist game as well. And Ratu as well. I think that he's kind of put forth a pretty good effort. And talk about pace. These guys just need to be able to keep pace with the NHL to kind of blend in if they get called up. And I feel like Ratu has done that. But yeah, Sam Lipkin, I mean, I don't have we haven't seen him playing training camp. He's practicing a non-contact jersey like once, but I love a college hockey player. I think you've seen it in the past couple of years. It's translated really well to the NHL. And he tore it up in the NCAA, and obviously winning at that level is very different than winning in the NHL. But I think that's a guy that when he gets healthy and gets some games under his belt in the AHL, you could see him be like, oh, why didn't I hear about him during training camp, or why wasn't he on my radar? So I definitely think that's a name to kind of keep in the mix, even though he wasn't able to show off what he could be for this team during this training camp, which is unfortunate for a young player coming into, this type of circumstance.
You guys have covered all the names, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say this is the first time with this franchise in a while that we haven't seen, well, that guy's going to get called up for sure, or this is the guy. Last year, you look at Guenther and Doan both playing down in the American League, and you go, okay, those guys are going to get an opportunity this year. There isn't that marquee guy that we've been following year after year. They're good names, and there's going to be guys that get games. But it's not that anticipation that we've seen in the past. Let's get to the position I think that this team improved the most in over the summer and the offseason, and that's on the back end in defense. I think they made some big acquisitions. Craig, why don't you start with who we have added to this lineup for the Utah Hockey Club? Give us the names.
Well, obviously, Mikhail Sergachev was the big addition. We were there at the draft, covering it that day, the second day of the draft, when they traded my guy Connor Geekie, among others, to get the number one defenseman that they have needed. Listen, Bill Armstrong told me late last season that rebuilding this blue line was priority number one. They clearly did it. They went out and got Sergachev, not just him. They got John Marino, who unfortunately is out right now. We'll see what his status is beyond the home opener. It looks like he's going to miss that. But when he comes back, I think that's going to be your top pair. In fact, that's what Andre Tourigny told me. And then the other pairs shake out. I don't know if you just want to talk about the top pair first, because there's
I do. I do. I think because Craig, I think what we talked about, what we thought, you're looking at Sean Durzi taking a step forward. Now he might be that guy with Sergachev. Yeah, let's talk about that first pair. Is Sergachev ready to be number one, first of all? And what do you think of this top pair?
To me, I just heard all sorts of opinions at the draft and then since of whether he is a number one defenseman. I had someone from Montreal, and I wonder if they're a little biased because they moved him, say, yeah, I think JJ Mosier is a better defenseman than Mikhail Sergachev, which I think is insane. I don't think that's the case. But is Mikhail Sergachev ready to be a number one? Well, it's hard to tell. He was playing behind Victor Hedman. You understand why he's playing behind Victor Hedman. He got a short stint when he was able to fill that role, and he put up a monster season, had an incredible production. So he says he's been ready for a couple of years, but we won't really know until he's in those minutes, logging those important minutes in those difficult situations, night in or night out. There are people around the league who think he's more like a number 2 or a 3 than he is a 1. He believes he is. The Coyotes, there it is. One in the jar, $1 in the jar for me. Utah obviously believes that he is a number 1 guy. There are plenty of people who know his game. I talked to Daryl Plandowski, who was, of course, in the scouting department in Tampa for a long time. And while Daryl wasn't a part of this acquisition, didn't even know what was happening on draft day, he had scouted him for a long time. But then they have people in their pro scouting department who have seen him a ton as well, Alan Heppel being the foremost among those. They really like this kid. They really think he's ready for this role. So we're about to find out.
I also think just the mindset he's coming into this season with, like you said, he's not playing behind Hedman, but he's also coming back from a huge injury. And I talked to him a lot about that at the beginning of training camp. He came back for 2 playoff games, but he broke his tibia and fibula in, February of last year against the New York Rangers. And it was supposed to be 3 to 4, 5 months, and he came back in 80 days. And I talked to the head athletic trainer of Tampa Bay, Tom Mulligan, just about what that rehabilitation process was like for Sergachev. And, he said right after it happened, he was wondering if his career was going to be over. How long is this going to take to get back to walking, to running, let alone skating? And he said that, he's worked with a lot of different players, a lot of Stanley Cup champions who have done whatever it takes to win. And he said he's really never seen anyone like Sergachev commit to getting better like he did, and in the competitiveness he had with himself to come in every day and get better. And he said that he could barely be at the rink because he felt so bad that he wasn't there to help his team win. And he wanted to be out there making the big plays, and he felt like he was letting the guys down. And, Sergachev said he knew he was going to make it back to this point once he kind of started seeing the light at the end of the tunnel when he was walking and skating and got back into those games. But he has a bigger appreciation for being in a locker room right now and playing in games. And he said there's still a little hesitation when he's going into corners and going to battles, which you would expect, but the more that he plays, the less he thinks about it. And I think with that, of course, this is a huge opportunity for him, just in terms of, if you look at the names on the roster, you would say he's the number one defenseman. And I think he's taking that to heart, and he knows it's not just his, he needs to earn it. But I think for him too, he gets to play hockey again. He's healthy, and he gets to go out there and do the things that he was dying to do when he was out for a couple months last year. So I think that has to go into kind of his motivation level to come out of the gates and prove that that injury is not going to define his career. He's only 26, and he has a lot more to give, especially in a new role for Utah.
Yeah, one of the things with Sergachev too, like I think this team and the way Bear builds team, there isn't, we talked about the lines. There's not a number one or a number two. This is a group of six. And some nights it'll be a group of seven. And I think he'll be the guy with the veteran voice, the veteran leadership. I think he'll be the guy on the top on the power play. He's the guy getting the ice time. There's no question that it's Sergachev. But I do think you're going to see this more of a group. And I know I put Durzi up there. The more I look at this now and I start to think about defending and playing both sides of the puck, I'm not so sure that it's going to be Sean Durzi. I like it, like a Valimaki in that spot, somebody that can help defend, and then putting Durzi with an Ian Cole. And I know we've seen that in training camp a lot. We've seen those two guys together. I put Bortuzzo in my top six only because Marino was hurt. I'm not sure you're going to see that. And this is what happens when you get a guy like Robert Bortuzzo, who's won, and he's a veteran guy, and just because he's a guy, we've seen it happen in the old franchise in Arizona. Just because you're a veteran doesn't mean that either A, you're in the lineup, or B, you're on the team. So there's still going to be some surprises here on the back end, I think, too, because I know Andre Tournier wants to get the puck moved up the ice quickly, and I'm not sure Robert Bortuzzo can help his teammates. He's a big guy, and he can play what we talked about, Bill Armstrong hockey. I'm just not sure he's the all-around defenseman that this team needs, and you really are missing John Marino from the lineup, Craig.
Yeah, big time. And we'll see. That it may not be that long. It's hard to get a sense of this timeline, but Andre did say that they're going to know more next week about him, but he will be out for the opener. Belle, do you have a sense of how they're going to juggle these D pairs for the opener?
I mean, earlier than this week, I would say Sergachev and Durzi started skating together the past few days, but for a majority of camp, he's been with Valimaki. So I think that's something that they feel comfortable doing when you talk about Bortuzzo and wanting speed with someone like Ian Cole. No dig on him, but he is, one of the older, probably slower guys in that D group, but he brings a ton of other values. But I think when he was with Durzi, that kind of balanced it out. But I also think if you do put Durzi with Sergachev, that's kind of interesting because he's come into camp really emphasizing that he is a defenseman first. And, he's been known when he came into the league to be an offensive defenseman. The points show for it last year especially, but he said he thinks a lot of people are sleeping on his defensive details, on his shot blocking. He had 3 block shots last night. He's on the penalty kill. He's on the power play. And he's more than, a one-dimensional, like he's not just going to go up and to the rush and leave his D man behind so he can go try to create, and I think that's something that he really wants the team and fans to know. So I think with Sergachev, if you're going to choose one guy to maybe be involved in the offense, you're going Sergachev, and that gives Durzi maybe a little bit more stay-at-home role, which he's kind of buying into as well. So I think it's interesting how Durzi's role kind of changes with who he's with and changes the dynamic of the D pairs, because obviously when he's with Cole, Cole's going to be the more meat and potatoes defenseman. So I think they've experimented with a ton of different pairs. I feel like I've seen basically everyone play with everyone throughout the past 2 weeks, and they're doing that for a reason. Like you said, there's no official timeline on Marino, so I think coach and the team are just, they want to be comfortable being able to throw any two guys out there, and they've done it so far. But I do think there won't be anything concrete until Marino comes in, because that's a huge acquisition in the offseason.
Yeah.
That was a huge part of rebuilding that back end. And you want to say that he's going to have to fight for his role and his spot and whatever, but that's someone they're going to want to insert immediately. So yeah, I wouldn't fall too in love with these pairs, because I do think you're going to have to reboot the whole system when Marino gets in, do whole chemistry testing once again and all that stuff. But for opening night, I feel like they feel like they're in the good spot. The same with the forward group. They have what they have, and they feel pretty comfortable with it.
Yeah, I think when Marino, for me, again, I'm just trying to look at what I would do if it were me. I think it's Sergachev and Marino, then I slide everybody on the right side down. Durzi, Valimaki, Kesselring, Cole. Now I've got three pairs that are a little bit different, but Kesselring showed last year he had the offensive upside. He can get the puck to the net. He's a better all-around player than I think we were anticipating. I think his ceiling is higher than we thought for that kid. I really like Michael Kesselring. I think he's going to be a really good defenseman in this league. I think Bortuzzo is going to be the odd man out. And real quick, a couple of names to look for on the back end. I think there's three, and unfortunately Kevin, and I'm sure Kevin Connaughton's dialed in and listening to the show tonight, former Arizona Coyote, Kevin Connaughton. Remind me, Craig, to tell the nice guy story someday. The Kevin Connaughton. I've told the nice guy story, but I never said it was Kevin Connaughton. So Kevin will tell it someday. I don't think Kevin's going to be the first guy up. I think you're looking at Kolyachonok, Zuber, and Lamoureux. And Lamoureux's going to get a taste, but it's going to be a while. I think they're going to let him bake. I think they're going to give him an opportunity to prove himself in the American League. Do I think he touches an NHL roster this season? I do, because I think defensemen, they go through several a year with injuries, and I think by the end of the year, Lamoureux will get iced. Craig, any thoughts on the guys that I have on the next up list?
No, those are all guys that I think you should look for. One other guy that I threw on there, we decided to put his first name in case people didn't know who the heck he was, and I have to say this with the redeemed voice, don't I? Patrick Cook. Andre's been impressed with him. He's actually thrown him in the mix. So it's going to be really interesting, especially with Marino out, to see who those two guys are that they keep up. I agree with you. I don't think Kevin Connaughton, is spectacular a quote as he will be the first call up, and I don't think he's going to be with the club, even with Marino out right now.
Belle, what do you think about what you've seen from both Kolyachonok and Zuber and even Connaughton in this camp?
Yeah, well, I was actually going to say about Patrick Cook. I can't do the accent, but I think before I talk about the other three, he's stuck around a lot longer than I think a lot of people expected. And he's been practicing with Group 1 for a majority of camp, and he was out there this morning with them. And he, like you said, he's been thrown into, second pair games, and he's survived it, and he's looked good. So I think that's kind of a sleeper on the back end. I think Zuber has also looked really good. I think that's someone that they definitely are going to think of if they have to quickly call someone up. I think he's at the top of the list. And yeah, I think it's the same thing where you finally have depth. I think Kolyachonok too. I almost could see him slotting in instead of Bortuzzo almost. I don't want to fully say that, but because you do need the balance of, if you're going to commit to having an older, more experienced back end, and maybe use the guys you brought in to do so. But I think that he's looked really confident in camp and isn't really hesitating and isn't scared to kind of be what the team needs him to be. And he's been physical, and he's been quick with the puck and quick with decisions. And I think that's something you really want too. So for me, he's almost seeping into that six come opening night. But at the same time, it's just a numbers game, and obviously there's not 7 defensemen. So,
Belle, I think this is one of the deepest areas of this franchise, and it will be for years to come when they get some of these guys that we've seen through the draft for the last 2 years finally making their way here. The next one's easy. The next one we're not going to spend any time on, because we know who the two goalies are for the season. It's Connor Ingram and Vejmelka. I almost forgot Karel Vejmelka. That's a tough one. It's been a while, Craig. But those two guys are on the team. They're going to make the hockey club. Those are the top two goalies you're going to look at. Matt Villalta going to go. He was an all-star in the American League a year ago. He is going to push these guys from the bottom. I think that's something they haven't had in a while, is a guy pushing from the bottom. You look at Stauber, who came in, Jackson Stauber came in from Chicago. He's a guy that's played NHL games. Another guy is very serviceable in the American League. Another guy you're not afraid to put in to American League games. But this is all about Connor Ingram and Karel Vejmelka.
Yeah, and none of their top prospects are ready to even move to the AHL level. So yeah, that's it. It's almost like stopgap with those three guys, right? You just hope you don't have injuries. You hope you don't have to press them into duty because none of your top guys are ready yet. Are we ready, on the other hand, to discuss the Central Division standings?
Yeah,
are we going
I think that we've got our, but there's going to be quick because we do like to keep the show, unlike some of the other shows on the All City Network. We like to keep our show at about an hour here on the All Utah Hockey Podcast. Before we move on, though, make sure you check out all Belle's work at the Salt Lake Tribune. I tell you what, fantastic inside, boots on the ground, inside the look of the locker room and on the ice. Make sure you're keeping up with Belle. And the story today with those two knuckleheads is entertaining and fun. And at the end of the day, this is a game. Let's have fun. And so make sure you follow along with what Belle's doing and check her out on Twitter too. What's your Twitter, Belle? I should know that. I'm not good at that.
Belle Fraser 1. And thank you.
Belle Fraser 1. Yeah, so jump on and follow her because you want to follow all of her content as the season goes on. I'll plug Craig a little bit more in the end. So Belle, we're going to make this quick, but we're going to talk about the Central Division. One, before we put up the graphic on the Central Division, we've talked about this Utah Hockey Club and what we think for opening night. They're going to play the Chicago Blackhawks. Not perennially, over the last few years, the worst team in hockey. Fair? Yeah. Fair, because it's true. You'll look it up. They're bad. They're better this year. They've got some players that are better. One, what do we expect opening night from Utah? And does the Utah Hockey Club make the playoffs?
Expect from opening night, it's almost a tired storyline now, but they want to make a good impression in front of their fans. They want the historic opening night game of Utah Hockey Club at Delta Center to be a win. And of course you want to win opening night if you're any team in the NHL, but I think, and maybe the players won't admit to this, but there has to be a little extra pressure because this game will be looked back on forever. And like you said, the franchise is technically new. They've played opening nights together before, but I do think there's just that extra layer of specialness, not a word, but that
you're not a writer or anything.
Yeah, we're allowed.
Buddy, I can make up I make up words. It's fine, Belle.
You do it all the time.
Yeah.
And Chicago's a team they can beat too, which I think there's almost no excuses there. Chicago's gotten better. Utah's gotten better. Most teams do get better in the offseason, And so I think you're playing an original 6 team with the last number 1 draft pick on it. You have the national viewership and it's their opportunity to kind of show the NHL that we are not here to play around this year. We have this fresh chapter. We put in the work in the off season and we're going to put an exciting, good product out on the ice. So that's what I expect from opening night. I think it would be kind of a letdown if they didn't pull through that way. But from what training camp has looked like, I think they're really gearing up for that. And then for playoffs, I have them on the bubble. I think if they do get in, it's going to be wild card and we're all going to be pulling our hair out the last 2 to 3 games of the season. But I think that would be great. I think that's a turning point, just for games at the end of the season to matter for this team would prove that they are at a different point in the rebuild than they were 1 to 2 years ago. So I'm not going to be fully confident saying that they're a lock for the playoffs, but I'm also not going to say that if they sneak in, I would be, completely surprised. I think that it's not completely out of the question, but I also don't think that if they don't make playoffs, the season should be looked at as a failure. I think making it to a point where you're in the conversation, you're battling for positioning is a lot further along, and is what a team in year 4 of a rebuild should realistically be doing. So that's where I stand on that. But
yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's where they hoped to be last season until February arrived and then everything, the bottom fell out. So I agree with you. Just be around the playoff mark at the end of the season. They're playing meaningful games to the end. That is progress, whether they make it or not. You want to put up this graphic?
I do. We're going to put up the graphic, and mine aren't that well thought out. But I want to talk to you about the Central Division. I'm going to go quick. I'm going to give you my 2-minute Central Division wrap-up. Dallas wins again, period. Nashville got a lot better. They're going to jump over everybody's second favorite team in the Central is Colorado. I think Nashville comes in second. I like their moves. I think Stamkos brings the leadership. They're going to be a very, very good team. Could challenge for the Western title. Colorado, we'll see. They still got the same goalies. Been a problem. Winnipeg, I think, takes a step backward, even though it's the same roster. I have Utah in fifth, just outside the playoffs. And I will say this in fairness, when I picked Chicago sixth, I was on a Chicago podcast talking to Chicago guys.
Drunk? You were
so
drunk?
No, I was trying to help. I was just trying to be optimistic for the Chicago fan base. St. Louis is much better, but I don't know what they are. And Minnesota, I still think, is hampered by the Parise and Suter contracts. I think there's turmoil in the locker room that people aren't talking about yet. I think there's an issue with having to play Marc-Andre Fleury too much, and they're one injury away from being a really bad hockey team. So I have Minnesota much lower in my lineup. Craig, your quick 2-minute Central review.
Okay, yeah. Listen, no issues with the top three. I agree with you. I still think Colorado's an elite team, and I think they're going to get some guys back this season. So I do think they're contending with Dallas. I think they could even win this division. Nashville, obviously, I'm surprised by what they did because I still don't think they're a cup contender. I'm not sure what their plan is, but I do think they're top three in this division. Winnipeg, I think we all agree there. St. Louis, I talked to Jeremy Rutherford about this. He doesn't understand the shade being thrown the Blues' way. They had 92 points this season. They got better in the offseason. I don't think St. Louis is going to drop off. I don't see that happening. I think St. Louis could be a playoff team. I agree with Bill Armstrong. Utah's not quite ready to be a playoff team, but I'm hoping, for the fans' sake, that they will be competitive to the end. All the stuff you said about Minnesota, I'm hearing as well. And the Blackhawks, I'm sorry, they still stink. That's my hometown team, but it's a bad team that needs a whole lot more than Connor Bedard to be a playoff team.
And Belle, your quick 2-minute Central Division wrap-up.
Not even 2 minutes, because I agree with basically everything you guys said about all these teams. I will say, other than Utah, the team I'm really interested in this year is Nashville, just with Marchessault, Stamkos, Brady Shea. I think those are really interesting additions that can, change the outcome of regular season and playoffs for a team. Just seeing Stamkos in a different jersey, I think everyone's pretty intrigued by that. So that's definitely a team I'm watching. Same thing with Utah. I think probably outside the bubble, but still fighting for a spot. And then kind of on the same page with you guys on all the other positionings.
Yeah, I think Utah's going to have an advantage, Belle, of just what you said. I think the expectations of going from a franchise where they didn't feel appreciated by the ownership to an ownership group that's giving them every reason to be happy and play hard and have no excuses on the ice. I think you're going to see a boost from a bunch of players. I think you're going to have players with breakout seasons. I think this is going to be a special year in Utah. I really do. There are a lot of keys to that, though. The goaltenders have to play well. Ingram and Vejmelka. Vejmelka has to have a better year. Has to. He's got to be better. You're going to have to have consistent play and no injuries through the middle of the ice. They got to get Bjugstad back, and then the middle of the ice has to stay healthy. And Clayton Keller split the team on his back like he has over the last 2 seasons. I think it's all very important that those things happen. But I do think this team, we could be sitting here in February still talking about the P word. We'll just say it now. We're not waiting this way. They haven't played a game. Yeah, haven't too early, Belle, but it's very, very possible. So I think Utah fans should be excited about their product, and make sure you hit that like button if you're in this and watching us right now, and make sure you tune in here, because now with Belle popping in with her boots on the ground, I like saying that, by the way, Belle, because you are the boots on the ground there. With Belle with boots on the ground and Craig's intimate knowledge with what's going on with the organization, the coaching staff, and the management, and my experience with the players, the staff, and the guys inside the room, I think this is the trio. If you want to hear what's going on in Utah, I think this is where you're going to find it. So make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel at All Utah Hockey, and make sure you subscribe to our Twitter at all_Utah Hockey, Belle Fraser at Belle Fraser 1, at Craig S. Morgan, at S. Peters Hockey. Thanks again for tuning in. Can't wait to see everybody next week after Game 1, and I'm guessing we're gonna be here after the game. By the way, it's going to be a post-game show live following the game against those Chicago Blackhawks. We're going to break down our thoughts, the good, the bad, and the hopefully not ugly in that game. Belle, thanks for joining us. Craig. Belle, thanks for joining us again. Craig, we'll see you next time. And everybody out there, we'll see you at the rink.
We all silly like the mayor.